Hi, I'm David Mulvert from the Johnston Office of Learning Technologies here at JCC, and I'm here to help you give your grade center an A. This presentation will last about 24 minutes, but it's basically an overview of the entire grade center, its menus and functions, more or less in a nutshell. And a few things to keep in mind about Grade Center before you get started. It is based on columns, which are your activities, and rows, which are your students, and where you put your students' grades. You need to set it up before you start your class, ideally, and the reason is once you've got these activities in there, they're going to be much easier to adjust before the class starts. You can't really remove things that have been graded already, so make sure activities that are in there are the ones you want in there, and then make sure you remove any activities that are not supposed to be in the course before students attempt them. Also, you can set it up as a points-based system or as a percentage-based system. Most folks do a 100% or 0 to 100, or I should say 1 to 100 grade. If you're doing a points-based system, it's a little more awkward to set up. So in a percentage-based system, it's really easy because your category weights at the end can determine the final importance of each activity in the course that leads to the final grade. So I recommend 0 to 100 grade point system or a percentage-based system if you can do that. All right, let's dig into the course. Let's log into Blackboard real quick. And I'm going to jump into a blank course that I've set up just for this demonstration. So let's get into that real quick. I'm going to call it my demo master blank course here. So if you notice, we have no announcements. There's nothing in the course whatsoever. And I'm going to jump into the Grade Center. But first, there's a difference between my grades, what the students see, and what Grade Center is, and that's what the faculty members see. So the students see my grades, and anything you enter in Grade Center, the students will see under the My Grades tab. We can't see that. But if we go to the Grade Center course management area and click Full Grade Center, that's where we need to do most of our work for the semester, and that's where this demonstration is going to go. So out of this, I can create a grade column, which is just a manual grade column. I can create calculated columns, which could be averages, maximum or minimums of a certain test or a certain calculation. A total column, which is nice if you're doing points. And then a weighted column, which is ideal if you're doing a percentage-based or 1 to 100 based grade center, which most people are going to be using weighted columns or average columns in their grade center calculations. There's also a lot of management functions available. Some important ones are grading periods. If you choose to set those up, I'll do a demonstration here showing you how to set up grading periods here in a bit. There's grading schemas. That would be your A to F schema. You can change that if you choose to. There's also color codes that you could adjust for certain grade percentages to make your viewing of the Grade Center easier. But more importantly, we're going to be setting up categories here in Grade Center to show you how grading categories can impact final grades. There are smart views, which are basically sort of set up ways that you can easily get to certain views within your Grade Center. And finally, column organization, which is another nuts and bolts piece on how you would arrange your columns. And finally, row visibility. That will let you hide students if they drop a course. You can check them and they'll disappear, or recheck them and they'll reappear. Finally, there's all kinds of reports that you can get. You can get a grading report for the entire course. You can view students' grade histories if you choose to. And more importantly, you can go in and see submission receipts. So if you have a student that tells you, I submitted something on a certain date, you can check the submission receipts to make sure Blackboard actually received it. Finally, there's some layouts that you can change in Grade Center. You can view stuff by categories, due dates, various things like that, date created, possible points, and also the student's display name. We're not going to really go into too much of an overview of that here in the course, but just so you know that these menu options are there. And also, whenever you choose any kind of a layout, you have a chance to have an ascending or descending view of that work. So let's manually create a grade column really quickly, and I'll show you how that works. That would be for like a paper-based quiz that you hand out and they're going to complete in class, and you're going to manually put that in, or maybe a take-home assignment that you're going to manually grade. So let's click Create Column. Once again, this is a manually created column. And once we do that, let's just name it for the name of the assignment. So for this one, let's call it class handout. I'm going to make sure the primary display is a score. I like using 0 to 100. We could use a percentage for this as well. So I'm just going to leave it at score. Score would also be equivalent for a points-based system. So, but let's just leave it at score to make things easy. For grade category, there are all sorts of predefined categories within Grade Center. A lot of things could be self and peer work, journal entries, blog entries, discussions, tests. Yes, of course, you're going to have a lot of tests. A survey, which is like a test, but a different kind of thing, and also an assignment. So I'm going to create this as an assignment. And once again, I'm using a 100-point scale, so I'm going to go 100 points. If I choose to, in this assignment, create a rubric, I can assign a rubric to this. So I could select one if I had one pre-made in the course. I could also create a new one on the fly if I choose to, so that's an option as well. And if I had some existing rubrics, I could create from an existing rubric or modify an existing rubric. Notice anytime I create an activity, the date created is going to show up, and I can also set due dates at this time. So I could check, let's see, something in August here. Let's pull up maybe the first week here, and it's going to be due at, let's say, midnight. Whoop, it's telling me that's going to be midnight of the start of the day on the 4th. So maybe I don't want to do that. So let's do, instead of midnight, let's choose the end of the day, which is what, 11:59. So end of day would be that. And we'll choose that. Okay. I can just close this box here. Also, we can decide whether or not we're going to have columns included in Grade Center calculations. I'm going to say no, just so you see that you can do that, but really, you really want to include everything in a Grade Center calculations. It doesn't hurt to leave those things in there. That's why they're in the Grade Center. Also, I can select whether or not I want to show a column to students, and if I want the students to see the statistics. So I'm going to click Submit, and now I'm back into my Grade Center. So you see I've got the class handout activity that is listed right now as a column. So I can quickly look at the column information here, and I can verify that it's set up. I've got a score, it's a column ID, the date created. It's not an external grade, and I'll mention that in a minute. But all these different options are available to us. Also, for instance, I could change the due date if I choose to. If I messed up, I could send students a reminder, which will send them over email to remind them that an activity is going to be due. I can look at stats. I can also set it as an external grade if that was going to be like the final grade students saw. I could hide this if I wanted to. Also, I could do some sorting. And finally, I could delete it. So this is an activity that I messed up on. I don't really do in the course. I can make sure I delete that. All right, now let's create some assignments automatically. So that's automatically going to populate it within the Grade Center. And that's different from the manual assignment we just did. So instead of create column, I'm going to click on my weekly lessons, and I'm going to go into, instead of building content, which is, where you would add in, items for students to view or audio and video links and those various things like that, I'm going to create an assessment. So there's different kinds of assessments we can create. I can create a test, which that means I would set up a survey pool or a test pool of questions that they could go through. I could set up an assignment, which is pretty much mostly used. So I'm going to call this, even though it's a test, I'm going to call it an assignment here. And let's go ahead and name this here. But I'm going to call it let's call this a paper submission instead of a test, but you get the idea. It could be either one. If I wanted to attach a file that described what to do, I could put a local file in. I can also this time choose a due date if I choose to. And I've got that in there. Also, once again, I'm using a 100-point scale, so I'm going to 0 to 100. I could add a rubric if I chose to. Once again, I could select a rubric or create a new rubric. And then finally, I can look at the submission details. So say I want to make sure they had multiple attempts or single attempts or unlimited attempts, but I'm going to say a single attempt here. And I can also check to make sure they're not plagiarizing for this paper using SafeAssign. But say I don't want this to be in the institutional database, I can just click Exclude Submissions. Most of the time you're going to include that, but I could exclude it if I choose to. We're not going to do anonymous grading or delegated grading for this assignment, so I'm going to display the grades, at the end here. And once again, I'm going to use a score instead of a percentage, but I could use a percentage or a 10-point scale. Secondary display doesn't matter. It's only shown in Grade Center to me, but I could change that if I wanted to. I'm going to just leave it as is and say none. Okay, so I can show the average and median statistics if I wanted to, but I don't want to. I can also make the assignment available or hide it, and then I can have it display after a certain time. So say this is when I want it to be available later on in the course. I can set that up. I always track the number of views, and I'll click Submit. Once you've set stuff up, it's important to get it in the proper Grade Center category. So let's look at that real quick. So in Grade Center, there are predefined categories that are already set up for us. And let's look at those. We have assignments, we have blogs, we have tests, journals, those kind of things. And I can click on these and you'll see, we got different types of things. On the right, there are actual columns that are associated with that, or I should say assignments are associated with that category. So it's a quick way for you to be able to see what is going on. I can create a new category though. So say I want to make a lab assignment category. I could type in the labs and do their lab projects and click Submit. And then that shows up as a category that I could assign activities or assignments to later on. So that's handy to have if you want to do that. We also can organize columns for different grading periods. Say we wanted to set up a grading period for different weeks. We can do that, or it could be part of the term. So let's set that up. So to do that, just go to the Manage menu and click Grading Periods. And let's create a grading period. And I'm just going to call this Week 1. And if I chose to at that point, I could set some start dates and end dates, if I wanted to. And that would be the range, but I'm just going to click Submit. If you look back here, I have Week 1, but let's create a second week. Let's create Week 2. And this one I'm going to put some dates in. So let's go ahead and set a date range. And we'll make it the second week of class. It's probably the wrong week, but that's okay. Let's do 2021 instead of 2020 in August. Okay, here we go. We'll say August 23rd. It's probably more like the third or fourth week, but they're 27th. Okay, sounds good. And I can say anything that in the grading period with the columns that have a due date within the date range will automatically be associated with that area. So I'll click Submit. And now I've got my grading period set up, Week 1 and Week 2. Okay, I'm going back into Full Grade Center. And now let's go into column organization. So if you see right here, I've got Week 1 and Week 2 set up. And I've got a few things that I want to stick in that are assignments. I want to stick into the correct week. So I'm going to take test number 1, and I want to move that to Week 1. And I just did that. I'm going to click test number 2, and I can change that to Week 2. And then I've got it under assignment, but I want to set these things up as tests instead. See, it's in the category. So let's select test number 1 and 2. I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to create that in the category of test. So let's go test. And you'll see real easy and quickly, I was able to organize both of those assignments into the test area. So let's click Submit. And there we go. Calculated columns are really great. I like using them for taking assignments and giving like an average for a bunch of different assignments. So say I've got a bunch of handouts and papers and I want to create a calculated average column that kind of shows the students what their average is just for that one area. So let's create an average column. And I'm going to call this one, say, class handout average or total. I'll just do average. I guess total would work for points. I'm going to make this a no grading period, but I could assign it to a grading period. But I don't want all the grade columns to show up. I'm going to select the ones for that, right? So since this is a class handout, I'm going to select my 2 class handouts. So I have to control click and hold down both of those and then click that little right chevron next to selected columns, and that's going to show up in there. So they're going to be class handout 1 and 2 are going to show up. Great. That'll be my calculated average. and I'll click submit. So now I have the class handout average in there. So let's go back to the create column, calculated column and create an average column again. I'm going to call this the papers. Let's do that one more time. I'm going to scroll down. And once again, I'll do a percentage display. No grading period. But once again, I want to select the columns just for that area. So let's do the papers. And those are next to each other. A little easier to submit here. Okay, check that and submit. They're selected. And I'll submit those. So that's going to give me an average of each of those kind of assignments in the column there. Now, weighted columns are a little different. They are not an average. We can assign actually dedicated weights to certain things. So let's do that. I would just go up to the create calculated column again, and I could select a weighted column at the bottom. But I've already got a weighted column here. It's the weighted total for the class, so I could just edit that. So let's go ahead and edit the column information and show you that type of thing. You would just imagine you went through the creation part. It's set up as a percentage, no secondary display, not in a grading period. But you'll notice on the right-hand side, I kind of messed up a little bit. I've already got some stuff in there. You can make categories is the ideal way to do this. But let me remove these categories I had already in there, and I'll show you how I would set this up. All right. So the first thing we're going to set up is an assignment or a test. But let's do assignment here. I'm going to add that to the column. If I click here, it's not going to add it. I need to be on the bottom chevron and add that in there. So if I click on the category tab next to the little star, which is a required value, I'm going to have to make that. So let's make that 50%. And I'm going to include all the grading periods, right? And that's the assignments and all the grading periods. And it's going to warn me it's not 100%, but I can say, okay. So I say, well, what else do I have in there? Oh, yeah, I've got the assignments. I've also got this papers. Let's go back and add that. So let's go back in there and click that. Click the edit column information. I can see the weighted total again. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to select, instead of assignments, I'm going to select the tests. And I'm going to add that and make that 50% as well, just for this demonstration. Creating all the grade periods are in there, and click submit. And that's all I got to do. So now it's going to show up that the weighted total will be that grade. So let's make sure the external grade is set for the correct calculated column. So I want to make sure my external grade is for that calculated grade column. For instance, I could set an external grade for anything in there. Like I could set it for a test average. So I could click here and go set as external grade. But then they would just see the average of their tests, not the average for the total course as their final course grade. So let's go back, and I'm going to select that for my weighted total, which is all the things there. And I'm going to just set that as an external grade. The green check mark shows up, and you'll see that. So if I look at the column information there, we know it's a weighted total. We know that the weights are correct for 50-50 for the test. That's based on our exam, right, and the assignments. So that should be okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and verify that and click submit. Now let's examine a kind of a live course and see what the difference is. This is not a full course. Obviously, it's a demonstration course that we use. It's the CIS 110 demonstration course. But you can see we've got quite a few announcements in here. Let me go over there and show you that we have actually assignments. So let's go down to assignments here and let you see that. And you notice we got some assignments. We can look at any of these. If I wanted to edit an assignment, I could click on that, look at it, change things obviously with the assignments, but I'm not going to do that today. But you can just see there's quite a bit of data in each of these weekly assignments, and each of those is going to have a lesson plan, which is set up for a grade center. So we should be good to go. I'll cancel there. So let's go down to my grades, obviously, for the students, but we want to do grade center. Let's look at the full grade center. And now you can see there are actually students in the course, unlike my demo one we had before. So we can sort by the current grade and see who's got the highest to the lowest grade. This student here has an F. I could create a course report or view grades, but there's no grade history within 15 days, so it's not going to let me see that. But let's go ahead and look at some, say, some submissions reports and see what we've got. So I'm going to say contains, yeah, not blank, and look at all the user submission reports. So I can see the date and time that things were submitted for the course, and each kind of assignment, you see the coursework on the left-hand side, and also who did it. So it tells me what it was done there. I'm going to go back to Grade Center again, and you can see last access to the course, and you can click the down chevron and sort by last name up or down, make things easier to find your students. I can scroll to the right and the left at the bottom to see all my different assignments in order. Now notice I've got the final grade here. I can click the down chevron and kind of see what that assignment is. So what is that? That's a weighted kind of total there. So I've got what a project is 10%, test is 40, assignments are 30, exams are 20, so that equals 100%. But that's not the final grade because that's not the external grade. So that might just be a grade for somebody to, be able to say, yeah, what's the calculation for this? Let's look at the current grade here. So let's edit that. So the current grade's a little different from final grade. This looks like it's calculating what their project grade is, their exam grades, the training, assignments, and discussions. And so basically how they're doing at that point in the class. So there's a difference between the two, but they're both calculated columns, and they are both able to be shown to the students. So helpful information in both of those areas. But the external grade is the current grade. That's what the students see is what they're getting in the course. All right. So let's go ahead and do a student grade real quick. So I'm going to the full grade center, and I've got Grade Center up there, and I can see all the columns and rows. And I want to give this student a grade on the Getting Started activity. So I'm going to click on the box here. I'm going to give this student an 80% grade. So I'll type 80. Let me close this dialog that popped up here. All right, so I've got an 80% in there for the student, and if I look at this, there's an orange tab in the upper left-hand corner. That is a manual override. That means that I've typed that grade in. It was not created automatically from Blackboard from an activity that was created. So I'm going to get some detail here. You can see I've got 80 out of 100 points. The original grade has been overridden. I look at column details, and it's showing it to the users, and it's including calculations. I can see it's a manual override with my 80. If I click on attempts, there's nothing there because it wasn't generated automatically. So I click on manual override. Let me go ahead and get some feedback to the student. I'm going to say nice job on this assignment. And I might want to make notes for myself. The student won't see these, but I can make a note maybe to follow up. So students improving, I would say, make sure to follow up. And I will submit that and save it. So that's going to show up in Grade Center. Easy way to get back to the full Grade Center is simply just to scroll down to the bottom, because right now I can't really get to it very easily. So I'm going to scroll down and hit full Grade Center again. And now I can see my entire spreadsheet, and I've got the student's grade that I just overrode or typed in right there. I see it's 80%. And we should be good to go with that student. So that was a lot of information to cover. I know. I appreciate you sitting through that, and I went through that pretty quickly. So let's figure out how to grade center assistance. So you can either contact us in Jolt at any time for Blackboard help, and there's also Blackboard documentation online, but feel free to contact us in Jolt. Easy way to get to some of this help stuff is if you go to the main JCC website, you click on Blackboard. There's a bunch of resources down at the bottom before you log in. So there's also after hours Blackboard support that people could chat with, but they really aren't Jolt. That's just to help students out with basic problems after hours. But there is a Blackboard self-help, and students can get help with that. If I click that link, you can see that it takes directly to the student area there. But if you look, there's also some instructor help on the left. So if I click instructor, it's going to take me to Blackboard Learn Help for Instructors, We are the original experience, not the ultra experience. So you would want to make sure you click the original experience on the left to get help. But that's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be, of course, to just go to Blackboard Help. And that's the main top area. So help.blackboard.com. And then instructor or teacher help would be what we would want to select. We could also Google and type in, Blackboard Help, obviously. And that would basically take us to the same area, Help for Instructors. So a bunch of different ways to get in there to Blackboard Help, but that will help us out. And make sure, obviously, that you're using the original experience versus the ultra experience when you were doing some things like that. So let's click original experience here. And you will see that it expands the original experience tab on the left. And this will break it down to all kinds of things for grading help, getting started, accessibility, student interactions, things like that. But for grading center, there's a bunch of grade center stuff on how to get your grade history, how you navigate the grading, customize your grading interface and things like that. So highly recommended to take a look through the Grade Center help on the Blackboard site. We've got some of the Jolt help site, but this is, I guess, the Bible, so to speak, that Blackboard is set up for us to use. So hopefully you will be able to find that. And like I said, grade columns tells you the three types of grade columns that we have in there. User columns, obviously external grade columns, and menu options that are in there available. So just a handy dandy kind of resource. And external grades, like I said, are shared with your institution as your students' grades for the course. So that is an important thing to make sure it's set with any kind of automation that might be going on in the future. So I hope that this was a helpful exercise for you with Grade Center. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments. I can be reached at d_mulford@johnsonscc.edu. And I thank you very much. Have a great day.